all living things play games. So that got me thinking, well, what if all these limitations were not there? Well, where do you stop? Or should you stop? Or would people want you to stop?
Thank you for doing this, man.
Thank you for the invitation.
So, tell me about yourself, what you do, how you got into this business. And at first, what do you do so people watching this know what you do and why they should listen to you?
I make games.
Okay.
I do it because playing games ever since I was little, I noticed that people can learn so much from games. They can get so much motivation to achieve their objectives and learn all these things that just wouldn't come their way through normal school or life and so on. So I felt that effect, and I would like more people to know it, and that's my motivation for making games.
Okay. You said something amazing before when we're having a coffee, that people play games, animals play games because, do you remember how you said that? It was so perfect.
So nowadays we think that games are basically a waste of time. Many people have that opinion. And that's not entirely incorrect, but I don't think it's entirely correct either. And playing games is not something just people do. All living things play games. Little tigers play games, worms play games, we play games, even before video games got invented. So this happens for a biological reason. Games give you a safe environment to practice a skill that's going to be vital in your life. That's why little cats chase each other around and they play the prey or the hunter, they change roles and they fool around with each other. So before one day they have to do it for real, that gives them the environment to go around and experiment and fail and do it 100 times a day, when in real life they might only need to hunt once a day or once a week. So that is the value of playing to living things, and I think games can have that plus a lot more value to us.
Okay. So tell me, what can you tell me about your company? I don't want to get any secrets or...
Yeah, sure. So my company is called Studio Vale. I was working in the Japanese games industry for a while, for about 10 years before starting it. So I got to work with some of the larger Japanese and foreign game companies. And eventually I felt that, well, in a big company, understandably so, you have certain limits for budget, for time, and so on. Also, no matter how understanding people around you are, you could never really make the thing that you wanted to make or with the people you wanted to make it with. So that got me thinking, well, what if all these limitations were not there? What if you could truly make something as it should be? That would require a completely different model. So I'm definitely not the first one to be doing this. I've heard of other companies that had a similar design philosophy before, but that's what I want to do. I want to make games that help people learn and motivate themselves, not just in game, but in life as well. And that is not an easy and straightforward process. There is a lot of R&D involved, a lot of failure. And I want to create an environment where we can fail multiple times until we're satisfied with the result before introducing it to our players.
From your philosophy, as you've described it so far, have you brought the concept of play into the work environment?
So the way I try to implement this is, as much as possible, I want ideas for how to improve the game, how to develop new features, decide which new features to decide. I want that to come organically from the team as much as possible, not so much by me top-downing everything. So back when I was working at another company, I noticed that during our Friday sessions, when we were just having drinks and relaxing after work, that was the prime environment where we could discuss the game that we're making at the time, ideas that we couldn't discuss during work hours because we were all in serious mode. And those ideas were the best, hands down. So all the things like, our game is really bad at that, or, this other company, they're doing this thing, we should be doing it as well. Those ideas were expressed in that space because it was safe, because people were relaxed, they were out of work mode. So they didn't feel strange talking about that. And the next day it was obvious that, this thing we talked about last night, that's the thing we should do.
So it's almost a place where if I say something foolish or stupid, then people could just laugh. But if I give a good idea, then we can implement it, right?
Absolutely. And you didn't feel the pressure from your boss or your colleagues or even the context of the project. You didn't think that, I have this great idea, but it's going to take months to implement, so I shouldn't even bother suggesting it. You didn't care because you said, our game is good, it would be great with zombies in it, why not? And then you can laugh, and if it's funny, you can laugh. If it's serious, then people are like, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Sometimes it makes sense. So having that freedom to express yourself is important. So in our case, I try to implement it by having a certain type of meeting that's more relaxed, more open-ended time-wise. It can end early or it can end much later, and it can go beyond the agenda. I know that's also a big no-no for big company mentality. Meetings must be 15 minutes or else. And we have those, but not just those. Sometimes a little seed of an idea can grow into so many directions, and it would be foolish to ignore it.
And say, okay, it's 11 o'clock, the meeting's over.
Yeah.
But you still have 10 more ideas, then what's the point of stopping there, right? You can get on the whiteboard and just write a bunch of stuff down and brainstorm, right?
Exactly. So always we keep in mind the big picture of the day. And again, brainstorming is good, but if we have something really, really good that needs to be done and it should be done instead, that kind of should take precedence. But somehow we always find idea for this sort of mental exploration and trying to find these things. And if nothing else, we can just note it down and have this huge list of ideas. That's, if we ever run out, I'm not gonna run out. We're gonna have stuff to work on.
Yeah. Well, for my YouTube channel, I have a list of like 20 ideas that I want to make. Some of them I look at against, and that goes into the pipeline.
Yeah.
Some of those go into the rejected folder because it seems like a good idea, but it's not enough for a 10-minute video. It's maybe enough for a short video.
Yeah, that's what generative AI has taught me, that to end up with one good piece of content, you'll go through 100. Easily.
We had a conversation in Akasaka when we first met. I want to hear your thoughts on generative AI, but remind me, I wanted to ask you, because you had a really good response when we talked about living in a simulation, but let's go into generative AI first. What are your thoughts? Is it going to take over humanity? Is it going to destroy the world? Is it going to help us? What's going to happen? What are your thoughts?
My thoughts at the moment is that the way it functions based on patterns, essentially, it would be kind of hard to take over anything. It just doesn't have the capability. I think it's going to help us a lot. People are afraid of it for many reasons. So it's going to teach our children how to make bombs, and it's going to take all the creative people's livelihoods away. But I mean, really, if you asked any person who's a specialist in their job, they would say, "Oh, great! Now I can do the things I do 80% faster." If you're willing to learn, right? If you're willing to go beyond your daily tasks. And I know that a lot of people who are passionate, especially in the games industry, they do so much research on their own time for their own interests around their work topic anyway. So this is naturally in their line of sight. So I'm really excited for what we can do. We're hoping to use it in our game in a way that helps you understand the game more, in a way that you can ask questions to the game and be taught and be retaught all the things you learned or you should have learned along the way. So it's exciting.
Can Chat GPT. I've seen this because I do YouTube,
Yeah.
and there are these tools that you can give it an idea, and it will tell you how many people will watch that video, right? Now, and so they've integrated other tools, almost like a chat line, like Microsoft Help or
Yeah.
Amazon Help could be using a Chat GPT based
Yeah.
chat bot. Can games have an integrated Chat GPT or Gemini component?
Absolutely. The question is making it good enough, right?
Mm,
So if we just, what was it? Somebody made a demo of Skyrim with ChatGPT implemented in all the NPCs. Very impressive. Unfortunately, irrelevant. And I really mean the unfortunate part because I'm the first person who wants to play Skyrim and have these like rich NPCs. But
yeah.
everything they say, even though it's along the general lines of what they should say, it's pointless because it's not relevant to your objective. You can ask the blacksmith how his day is going and all that stuff, and it's great. Where's the dragon I have to kill? just tell me, man. Just tell me. I don't want to know about your chickens and whatever.
That's true. So for people who don't know, what's an NPC?
An NPC is any character you see in the game that you do not directly control.
Okay.
It stands for non-playable character.
Non-playable character? Okay. Okay. Oh, interesting. Hey.
Yeah.
Oh,
so do we live in a simulation?
I think I asked the wrong question.
Was that a glitch in the Matrix?
Could be. If you see the cat go past twice,
yeah,
it's a glitch in the
when
Matrix.
You know.
Yeah.
That's when you know.
Deja vu.
Yeah. Like, did you watch the Animatrix?
No.
So if you get a chance, it's a series of short clips, right? There's one called Beyond. It's very thought-provoking. I recommend it.
Okay. All right. If I can find, I'll put a link in the description here of this video. So, are we in a simulation?
That would be impossible to tell if we cannot observe the simulation from the outside.
Okay. So this has been the topic of like hours and hours of podcast and videos, but it's impossible to tell.
Yes.
Okay. That's a simple
yes.
Simple answer. Okay.
So you need to have a list of measures to judge whether it's real or fake, right? But anything you can think of is from the world that you know. So even if you say something, well, in the real world there's no dragons. So if you see a dragon, then you know it's a simulation. Well, what if they evolve in 20 years to exist from Komodo dragons or something?
That's true.
So anything you can imagine it with the tools that you have in this simulation, if it is one.
And there are rules based on the creator of the game, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost like trying to understand God or something, right? It's an intelligence that's so much higher than us that we say like, oh, there is, there isn't, but it's beyond our intelligence, right?
It's more than that. It's just we don't know. It's like the number 9 trying to imagine itself as a chemical substance. It's a number. It's expressed in the number system. It doesn't have the chemical substance dimension. Maybe it's vaguely relevant if you express it enough, but it's just a different system.
Okay.
And asking, who made this or why they made it and who's running it and so on. Well, how do you know it? Someone's running it.
That's true.
What indication do you have?
We don't know. Yeah. Okay.
So,
it's just interesting to think, like, is there enough computing power, for example, to?
A better question is, well, what would you do differently if it was or if it wasn't a simulation?
So what, right?
Yeah. So
what if we are?
Let's say you want to go outside and go for a steak dinner. If it wasn't a simulation, would you go? Or if it was, wouldn't you go?
Because I can still taste the steak, like Cypher in the Matrix, right? It tastes like steak.
Yeah, so if you get out of the Matrix, would you stop thinking, man, I'd like a steak right now?
Or what if we're in the Matrix, for example, just as a thought experiment, and the real world is like this dingy dystopian, and we unplug from the matrix, and then we go out, and then the world is like post World War III, and then
Well, I have a better question for you.
okay.
According to known science,
Mhm.
the energy death of the universe is going to happen in a long time, but it will happen.
Couple billion years, I hope, right?
I think I think it's more than that, but it will happen eventually.
Hmm.
So everything we do, all of this, meaningless. It's all going to turn to dust. Now that you are aware of this, will you live tonight and tomorrow any differently?
No, because it's going to happen in a couple billion years, right?
Yeah, so I think it's good to ponder about it, but also think about what you want to do anyway.
Mm. Good point. Good point. So, why Japan?
So growing up, I got exposed, I feel, to a lot of the Western side of the gaming industry,
Mhm.
a lot of Western and European games, which I absolutely love.
Mhm.
I also got exposed to some Japanese games, which I did
Mm.
not understand at all when I played as a teenager.
Like, did you play Zelda or?
Yeah, or Final Fantasy, or I didn't know where to begin. You know, why are these characters on the screen like that? Why don't they just move on a platform and kill things like everybody else? Or why, why do they look like that? Why
Mm.
must their appearance be so different from anything else I know? So because it was so different and so foreign, it was
Mm.
so interesting. And the more I looked into it, the more I understood it. Well, first of all, I managed to actually play the game and enjoy it,
Okay.
rather than looking at me like, where do I begin? Um, and then I thought I had to know what sort of culture can generate this content, because it clearly wasn't an issue of, these people did something slightly differently. No, it was completely different than
Completely.
anything I knew.
Mm.
So I felt I had to understand the context where these games were made if I wanted to understand them better.
Mm.
So I was interested in Japan. I read books and I watched movies, and those were good, but they were not answering my question. And
Mm.
at some point, I think I watched Ghost in the Shell 2, Innocence,
Mhm.
and I felt that, I could read the subtitles
Mm.
100 times over, and I would still not get the true meaning of what's being said.
Mhm.
And it's just as much a matter of understanding the language as understanding the culture, and the culture to that level where you can, philosophize about things and
Yeah.
so on. So I'm not saying I got there. I'm not saying I've defeated that goal yet, but I definitely felt that being here and experiencing the culture
Mm.
would help me understand it more.
Yeah, I've studied Japanese for over 30 years. Lived here total maybe 20 years. I've never got to the final boss in
Yeah.
Japanese language or culture. It's like that Russian doll. You take one out, there's one more inside. It's like an onion. You keep, there's always one more
And
layer.
that's beautiful though,
It
isn't it?
is, yeah.
If it was the other way around, if after 5 years you understood everything, you'd be
Yeah.
like, okay, moving on now. What other countries are there?
Yeah, I might be in China
Yeah.
by now, or Vietnam or something.
Yeah, and that kind of makes you wonder about how deep you want to delve into things, how much you want to explore. And really, this goes with anything, right?
Mm.
Yeah, let's say you want to make a table. Is this good enough or is it not? Does it need better wood and better shapes and
Yeah.
better processes? And really, there is no end to this.
Mm.
You'll never have the perfect table because of all these parameters.
Yeah, could it be metal? Could it be wood?
Yeah.
This looks manufactured? Could these little knots in here, are they real?
Yeah.
Or are they fake?
The creator of the iPhone was speaking to his book about about design, how design has two sides, right? The visually aesthetic and the functional, and they must coexist. So if you thought, you kind of cracked the way ahead, there's so much to consider.
Yeah.
So, useful and aesthetic, but to whom? To you, to the customer, to all the customers? So that's the creative battle, right? You can never get everything right. But that's not to dishearten you, that's to energize you that
Yeah.
there's all this opportunity. I could delight all these people with things I make.
Mm.
This creation process can go on forever. I personally enjoy it, so I recommend it.
And how do you know when a game is done? It's
Well,
ready to be released.
It's not. It's never done. So any great game designer I've heard interviews from, they've never said, you know what, that game was like uh, like Euclides' books on geometry. All of it is contained in there. You don't need anything else. Nobody has ever said that. They all said, you know, if we had 2 more years, we could have done so much more.
Yeah.
And then you start thinking about games, right? So what was the point of making the game? Why did we stop making the game? Why don't we make more of the game? For games that are, let's say, MMORPGs, so online games that keep on giving out content perpetually. Well, where do you stop? Or should you stop? Or would people want you to stop? Or do people still care even if you don't stop? And then you think, wait a minute, this is not straightforward at all. So in World of Warcraft, they had this, you know, industry and world-changing run that they did. And then one day they decided, but you know, the early days were nice. So they have in parallel the World of Warcraft Classic, which is just the earlier time of the game running in parallel, you know, with the main game.
I love World of Warcraft. What's your favorite race to play?
I don't like World of Warcraft at all.
Okay.
I'm, you know, it's just one of those things I never got into.
Okay.
But I do deeply respect what it does
The
and
work they did, yeah.
yeah, and what it means to people. But there was this argument back in the day about, you know, should people be paying for the old version? Should it be a separate subscription? Should it be free? Is it okay that they're both together, that they're selling as the same thing twice, and so on? So those are not answers you can answer universally. So the conclusion I've come from all this is you just create it and you just let it out into the world, and hopefully it has a beneficial effect. Or if people don't like it, they don't pay attention to it. But as a creator, that's all really you can do. You can put your best intentions and work into it and let it sail.
Yeah. So what is, when you start to create, let's say you start with a blank slate, you're creating a new game, or you're using like an Unreal Engine or something to create a new game with something on top of it. I don't know the process, but what is the goal when you create a game?
So there's many philosophies around this as well. What you're trying to create and when do you think people should see it and so on. Personally, I think one approach you can take is think of the final result, right? So when somebody gets this game in their hands, what should they experience, or what do you want them to learn, or what do you want to show them, right? So a famous Greek songwriter, our national bard, said once that a song is the shortest distance between two people, because he meant it as a means of communication of what he felt. And I think a game can be the same as well. So you start with the things that you have experienced that you want to share. It's the same feeling as the little kid finding a spider or something in the garden and catching it and being like, Dad, I got a spider. It's that feeling that you discovered something unique and you want to share it. The meaning of the discovery is that you have something to share. You know that, you know, other people probably haven't seen this, or you think they haven't seen this. So you want to share this feeling with them. So, you know, that's what we do. We play all these games, we research all these crazy ideas, and we come up with some interesting ones. And those are the ones we want to share. You're wondering, do people know you can have this game? Do people know you can have this experience? Do people know that you can fly your own airship with crazy guns and like cannons and everything? Well, what if they did? What if somebody who has no idea about this game got it in their hands? What would they feel like? What would you want them to feel like? And what would you like to communicate? So you think about these things and you come up with some, we call them game pillars, which are 3 or 4 core ideas about the game. So if we're talking about an airship game, maybe you can fly with an airship, you can captain it, you can do battle with it, you can explore the world with it, let's say. So you start with these very core ideas and you say, okay, that's what I want people to feel, that's what I want people to do. How does that manifest in the game? And then from each one you draw an array of features that you want to have in the game. So obviously the ship, obviously the controls, the guns, the world to explore, the enemies, the challenges, and so on. And so when you're designing all these things, you're going through the mental checklist. Why did I make each feature? Why? Why does the airship need a physical manifestation? Why isn't this a text game? Why isn't it just a sound game? Why do we need this? Why do we have enemies in the game? Why is the stage set in a wasteland versus a metropolis versus in space or whatever? If you think about all these things and what all these things could be, then you see that there's meanings attached to each one of them. And so by putting together as best as you can the meanings that you want to communicate, what happens is what we call things start to take shape. So I don't know if you've seen games early in development, but they're basically just some gray boxes moving around the screen before you give them nice graphics and so on. So going from these vague ideas to the boxes to the polished graphics is this taking shape process. And it can take a really long time. That's why you feel like it can never be done, because there's always one more thing.
To make this, make it a little bit harder, add a new element or a new boss at the end or something. What do you think about games that get progressively more difficult? Like let's say Pac-Man or something. The first screen you can just run through and never get in trouble with the ghost. The next screen is a little harder. After 4 or 5, it's like, oh no, I'm gonna die now.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm really of two minds about difficulty. On one hand, I don't think things should be difficult because they just stop people from playing them. On the other, I know that when I was a kid and I was playing games, the difficulty was what kept me most of the time. And it didn't happen with all games, right? Some games I played and I thought, whatever. But some games, surprisingly even so, like Toy Jam and Earl, I don't know if you know this very obscure game. I was playing it on the Master System, and it had several levels, and I could only get through the first 2. And I thought, oh man, this is impossible. I was getting so frustrated. And then the next day, I would put the game down, and then the next day I would pick it up again. And now I'm wondering, why did I do that? Why did I go back to this very, very difficult experience and not, do something else? So there's several things that happen here psychologically, right? One is definitely ego. You want to feel the rush that you got the time you passed the first stage, and you want to feel it again. Not backing down from a challenge is another one. Growth, entertainment, you felt that, okay, this game was hard before, but you got over that, and then it was really fun and enjoyable. So you think, well, it's probably going to keep on being like that, so that's motivation to keep on going. Sometimes the theme of the game is really interesting, or the story. You want to know what happens next, or if it's a Star Wars game, oh, I definitely want to see more Star Wars. You can never have enough Star Wars, so that's maybe a motivation for you. Or a game about dinosaurs. I love dinosaurs. I'll play anything with dinosaurs. So there's all these motivations, and unfortunately they're not the same for everyone. But I think that difficulty, other than all this stuff, it also teaches you something super, super interesting for life. You think that, you've beaten some pretty difficult games in your life. And then you talk to other people and they're like, oh no, that game, that's too hard for me. I would never even, or you think about your parents or your grandma, like no chance of even passing the first minute or so. And you think, well, there's all these people, right, who were older than you at the time, smarter, and they didn't have a chance of beating this, but you did. So were you more intelligent than your father when you were playing games as a kid? Well, I don't know, but if you think back to it, really well-designed games, they put this series of objectives that teach you how to play the game and level up your skill at playing the game. So when they present challenges, it's to test your skill up to there. And if you pass that test, then you go and do it all over again. And you think, wow, so basically, if you just play that game the way it's intended, and you learn from what you do, and you take it one step at a time, and fail as many times as necessary, the game is still going to be there. You can build up the skill and get there. You're like, wait a minute. So by doing this process, which is dead simple, I did a thing that nobody around me can do. Is that not a bit like life? So, when somebody is a great violin player, or a great basketball player, or a great lawyer, you think, how did you get so good? Well, they say, well, I didn't. I just kept every day going at it. What did you do every day? Who was your teacher? Yeah, I had a teacher, but he just told me, do this, and then study that, and then when you finish that, study the next thing. Or I know a lot of people who just picked it up on their own, and they enjoyed the process. They enjoyed this safe environment of failing and progressing with no external interference. And before they knew it, they could do things. With an architect friend of mine, we were playing Dungeons and Dragons, and he was so motivated by the world of the game, and he wanted to create some of it in his architecture software. And there was a new software that he wanted to pick up and learn, and he just needed an excuse for it. And the next time we play D&D, he says, oh, I need to show you this thing I made in this new software. I stayed up until 3 a.m. to do it. And he had really done part of the world that we're playing in, part of the airship, in crazy detail. Very atmospheric, really captured the feeling of the campaign that we were playing. And I'm like, what you did is quite amazing. He's like, oh, the graphics are not so great. I'm like, no. You learned this brand new software last night for fun, to make something that's not even work for you. You cannot even use it for work. It's like, dead effort, essentially. He's like, well, what do you mean? So I'm like, if somebody tomorrow at work brings this new software and says, everybody needs to learn it because we're going to use it in the next 3 months, whatever, how long do you think it's going to take you to learn that? 3 months, 6 months is not nearly enough. It's going to be a chore. You're going to keep postponing it. No. But you learned this thing last night. At 3 a.m. And it's not even going to help you in work. So you were playing with it and you got all this value out of it just because you took the next step and then the next one as you felt comfortable.
That's as a child, we had black and white TV in my house, and we got a color TV and remote control, which is really cool because as a child I was my father's remote control. And then Windows 95 came out, and everybody, I remember in Tokyo people lining up around the corner in Akihabara to buy Windows 95, and all this new software comes out, and people my age sometimes can't keep up with new software. But since I make videos, if a new software comes out where I can edit a video, I'll do the same thing. Because for me, it's fun. And it's a safe environment. It's play.
Yeah.
And then I remember it because I want to know how to make this move from here to here on the screen. I'll spend hours. I'll watch YouTube videos.
And the tangential learning opportunity on games is out of this world. It's really out of this world. So you may have heard of the Assassin's Creed series of games where they go into all these historical places, or Metal Gear series that has all these military related things. Those two are pretty famous, I think, for the tangential learning they incite, where you see a place and you're like, was that place really like that? Or like they're talking about Spetsnaz. Is Spetsnaz a real thing? And you go and read for hours, and you keep on going for that. I think that is incredible. So Movies can do it to a lesser extent. Books can do it to a lesser extent. School never does it.
True.
Games have all this, motivation for people to go in and learn. Or, um, yeah, I'm sure you can think of so many examples
Sure.
of your
Well,
own.
we were talking over coffee. I mean, that's why I know what a hoplite is because
Yeah.
I played um,
Age of Empires.
Age of Empires, and I know I was joking the difference between a trebuchet and a catapult.
Yeah.
Because I played Age of Empires. Yeah.
Yeah, and the drive to beat the game's difficulty and like see the next horizon in the game is so powerful. I remember I went through school and all of university learning really, really minimal math, truly minimal. And then I got to Monster Hunter to a point where I had to choose one of three swords to progress in the game. I had the materials to craft it, so there was version A, B, and C. And one had slightly more critical, and the other had slightly more base damage, and the other had, I think, some elemental damage. And I'm like,
Yeah.
they're all good, right?
Yeah.
But one is better than the others. So I had to put the game down. This was back on PSP. And I had to Google how you calculate damage in that game, and then what all these numbers mean, and then how to average the benefit you'd get over time for each one of them, and then apply it to my specific playstyle. And for these specific circumstances, one of them was better. But that required so much looking into mechanics and like averaging, because with criticals and things that have a chance of going off, you're like, okay, do I calculate the case that it does go off or the one that it doesn't? Or do I take an overtime thing? Does it make sense to calculate the overtime? And these are questions they asked us at school, and it went right over my head. Like, how do I care? Like, what's the average speed of a swimmer? Like, I don't care. It's irrelevant. Somehow this makes it relevant.
Yeah. Well, two trains leave Frankfurt Station, right? One is going west, one is going east, or whatever. Or one leaves, Dusseldorf, one leaves Frankfurt. This one's going 20 kilometers per hour. This one's going 50 kilometers per hour. What part of Germany will they meet? Okay. I don't know, but if it's in a game, I'll figure it out.
You have the motivation to do it, right? You get out of it. So Aristotle, back in the day, he came up with these 4 principles for telling a good story. But I think it applies to any conversation, really. So he said you need, well, I won't go into all of that. But anyway, one of the more important ones is relevance. So when you're telling someone something, it must be relevant to that person. Otherwise, why would they listen?
True.
If I start talking about my gardening and you have no interest in gardening, you're like, yeah, okay. Why are you talking to me about that? You could be talking to me about anything else. So I think school makes that mistake a lot. Like everything is irrelevant in school. Everything is, do learn this because it's going to be useful to you one day, maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
And you forget. Did you know that waiters have this phenomenon where when they have an order that's unfulfilled, it's very clear in their mind. Like this person needs potatoes and steak and Coke and whatever. And then as soon as they fulfill the order, it's gone.
Gone. Yep.
And they can't even remember what the person wanted, the particulars of the order. But as long as it's unfulfilled, it's there in their mind. That's what happens to us with exams.
True.
So we remember everything up and then
and I've told people about this because I've taken exams where I could tell you everything the day of the exam, and as soon as the exam's over, I move to the next task, and all that stuff is gone.
Yeah.
And people say like, but you studied for a whole semester Chinese poetry, right? And I took that class in Asian studies. I took Chinese poetry. But as soon as the semester was over, like I didn't study it again. It was a good class.
Yeah.
Great professor. But that was it. I think we were talking about, kind of switching gears here, we were talking about the bonding experience. of two guys sitting down to play a game, or a group of guys sitting down to play a game, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What's the value in that?
Yeah, so think about it, right? What do guys typically do? They play sports together, they work together, maybe they're in the military together, they have all these tough bonding experiences. Um, I mean, unless it's work, right? But even work, maybe it's not a good example. You don't get many chances to have that bonding in a positive environment. So work is kind of like, you're in the trenches together. Army, I guess it's the same. You know, your hobbies are what's not like that. Hobbies are the more positive side of it. So maybe you're playing basketball, or maybe you're out for drinks. You don't get to do that often. So if you meet to play sports, it's what, once per week, twice per week.
Yeah.
Even drinking. But games, people after work, if they hop on a game, it's mainly because they have friends to talk about or to talk with there. And the game can go on, for as long as you want. You can play a game all weekend with your friends, but could you play basketball all weekend?
No.
Or
could you drink all weekend?
You could drink, no. So and that feeling of like, it's like the accelerated learning. This is like accelerated bonding almost, where you meet someone, you have a similar skill level, similar interests in the game. You talk a bit, you get each other, and then you're like, okay, let's do this dungeon together, or let's try and do this other objective together. And that is essentially the same as we're talking about before, like the little lions coordinating with each other for the hunt. I go left, you go right, type of thing. And you get to do it over and over and over and over again, and analyze it and do it again, like day after day. So we talked about World of Warcraft. How many people do you know that say, oh, people in my guild, they were on it, we knew what each other was doing, we're on the same page, so focused, so cooperative with each other that we could clear any content, basically. And clearing the content is not the point here. It's that feeling that in that space we are one and we feel like a unit, and throw whatever you want at us, we'll handle it. That is the sort of fulfillment you don't get in life unless you try to do something grand. You don't feel it every evening. It's not on the same scale.
Wow, that's true. And that's a great place to end. It's been very short, but we got this room until 6, so
cool.
I appreciate it. Xanthos, thank you. All right.
Hope it helps you.
And by the way, how can people find your company?
So our website is at stvale.com.
Okay, I'll put that downstairs in the description, okay? Alrighty, thank you.